Okay. All right. Pleasant and dignified moment, everyone. I am Amber Luminario from the Philippines. I am a sustainability and resilience advocate and one of the steering committee members of the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. So, before we officially start this program, this webinar, I would like to request everyone who is watching with us right now to please share the link of this conversation to your friends. Okay. Welcome to our first ever conversation about dignified menopause. Today, we are participating in a webinar on contextualizing surgical menopause in the socio-cultural setting of the Global South. So, for those who are new in this conversation, we would like to give you a brief overview about Global South Coalition, or we call it GSCDM. The Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation was founded by Radha Paudel. She is an amazing menstruator and a passionate advocate for women's rights. She is committed to advancing the cause for equality, across the globe. And to know more about her works and the impact that she's doing in our community, in the global community, you may visit the Facebook page of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, as well as our website, which is www.dignifiedmenstruation.com. Also, we have Twitter. It is Global South DM, and you can also watch the YouTube videos for more details about the discussions and conversations. There's also Instagram, actually, so you can get as much information from these social media platforms. So without further ado, because I am also one of the excited individuals to listen about menstruation as well as menopause. And at this point, allow me to introduce to you our speaker who will share her insights with us today. And brace yourselves. And also, as much as possible, we want this to be interactive, so you can type in your comments and your insights as well during the conversation. Our speaker is Udita Bose. She is pursuing a fully funded Ph.D. in anthropology and at Brunel University in London. Her research is largely focused on the menstrual experiences of adolescent girls in India. Her interest in pursuing PhD stems from a very personal experience. Ms. Udita Bose is a first-year doctoral researcher pursuing a fully funded studies in London, and she has received a bachelor's, master's, and MPhil degrees in sociology from Jadavpur University, Calcutta in India. She is also interested in contextualizing menstrual experiences, ethnography, participatory action research, creative methods, and as well as addressing stigma, inclusivity, and intersectional theories and decolonization. She has worked as an intern in CRI, or Child's Rights and Youth. She also helped in collecting data for national research on anti-child labor. She raised funds and wrote field reports. Also, she has disciplines of sociology and geography. She is a trained elocutionist in Bengali language and runs a YouTube channel. So you can find out more about her in her YouTube channel so that she can advance her art. And in the future, she wishes to use YouTube as a platform to address areas of her interest. So to all our viewers, let us make this conversation interactive. As what I've said, please send your comments and questions to the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation Facebook page. So now, allow me to give you our resource person for this conversation, Ms. Udita.
Hi, Amber. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm glad to collaborate with the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation and advance this conversation further.
Yeah, thank you also for reaching out to Global South Coalition to share your insights about your personal interest on dignified menopause. So, for this conversation, for the first day of May, and we would like to also emphasize the fact that it's Labor Day. So, and there are also other interesting sub issues that we can explore. But for now, at this moment, let us all focus our attention on how we can contextualize the surgical menopause in the social cultural setting of the global south. So, Udita, I am personally, when we first met, first thing that came to mind, I don't think that you are in that menopausal stage. You look so young, and but yet then you're very passionate about menopause. So I would like you to share this to our audience. What made you decide to delve into this issue or this topic?
Thank you, Amber. And yes, you're right. I'm definitely not heading toward menopause anytime soon. I'm in my late 20s. And but then I'm very passionate about advancing conversations about menopause. So this stems from a very personal experience of having to witness my mother go through a phase where she was heading towards menopause, and then at that time she was diagnosed with very early stage of cancer. And I think that is where the awareness started, and advancing my PhD project on that ground begun. And I realized how important it is to have conversation about menstruation from a very early age and a very early stage in your life. So in the particular context of my home, we've never had this a shame or a stigma associated with conversations about menstruation. So it has always been a very open context where you could advance conversations about menstruation. So when my mother, for example, noticed that, she's going through irregular menstruation, that is when her consciousness about her own body and about having to go through medical treatment begun. So I think that is very important to realize that having an agency, and what do I mean by agency is that to have control of your own actions, of how you advance towards treatment, of how you learn to respond to your body, to learn to listen to what your body is trying to tell you, and not, take in what the other socio-cultural context is trying to tell you, and focus on your individual self and advance your treatment is very, very important. So I think that is where my interest in menopause came into place. And that is why I'm here to share my experience and take this conversation ahead.
It seems like you are very close to your mom, and then you were able to see her journey. Um, is it possible for you to share more about how you saw the challenges or the struggles that she went through at this stage of her life? Because to me, this conversation is unpopular. Here in the Philippines, as what I've shared with you, we do have advertisements about menstrual products, but usually it would be more of a teenage girl and then using a menstrual product. But then the the story fades from there, and then the menopause menstruators, sometimes they are their situation are not that much being talked about. So I can you please share, as a daughter, your perspective on how your mother faced those kinds of challenges, and then how, what what were you thinking then when she was going through that?
All right, I'm glad that you asked this question. I think it was a learning experience for me as well, because I think to be alert is very important. That when you're noticing that you're going through irregular period, and there were people around her telling her that it is very normal, you're heading towards menopause, and it's very normal to go through irregular period during this time. You don't have to hype it, you don't have to go to a doctor, you don't have to get yourself treated. So but it is important to be conscious that this is not normal. That when I'm going through irregular period, I need to go and visit the doctor, I need that medical intervention to come in. I need to know what is happening to my body. So I think that is what led her to, go and visit the doctor, get her ultrasound done, and I accompanied her through every stage of it. And I think what is important to understand is that, menstruation, if you start menstruating, that goes on till a certain age, right? But then if you look at how education about menstruation is being advanced, firstly, there is still an air of silence about it. And there is hardly any dialogue about menopause in school textbooks, or in any other advancement of knowledge that is happening. And I think it is very, very important to have conversations about menopause at a very early stage, because you need to be aware of the fact that menstruation will be with you to a certain age if you start menstruating, and you need to have that information early on, so that like for example, in the case of my mother, she's absolutely fine now because her diagnosis happened at a very early stage. But then on the contrary, I've seen friends who've lost their loved ones because their cancer was not diagnosed at an early age. And this happened majorly because the conversation about menstruation at home was completely absent. So I think it is very, very important to set that ball rolling, and to start with the everyday practice and the everyday reality that we live in.
Okay, thank you, Udita. Now that you've shared this with us, this is in your community, right? Is this in India?
Yes, it is in India.
Okay, so I'm wondering, for sure your mom has friends who are about her age. So does she have any support group?
Well, if you're asking me about support group, yes, she has. She has a wider network of people who would support her during that time. And I think it is also important to understand that just as menstruation puts you through a lot of physical changes, biological changes, you also go through a lot of emotional changes during that time. Because you're heading towards menopause, and just like on the verge of it, you're also aging. So there are two different sectors joining in, and you are also emotionally feeling that I'm aging and my body is behaving differently. I have not sort of encountered this situation before. So this is something new to her as well, that she has not encountered irregular periods before. So even it is a learning experience from her. And therefore it is very important to respond on time and to understand to what your body is trying to tell you. And I'm glad that she had that agency to recognize that, and that recognition of how her body is behaving. And that is what you need to grasp. And to grasp that, I think it is very important to be alert and to have that information with you, that it is not that irregular period is always that you're heading towards normal menopause. It might require medical intervention.
So aside from medical interventions and her irregular menopause, her irregular menstruation, now let us you were able to mention that there are also other aspects that we have to consider aside from the physical changes that a woman or a menstruator is going through, right? So can you tell us more about the the emotional aspects that she has went through, and we can also add to this the as a researcher, your perspective on what you observed from your mom or from other menstruators who are at that menopausal stage. Are there like distinct changes in the emotional well-being? Are there other challenges when it comes to their psyche or their psychological um, view at this phase of their life?
Yes, I think there are quite a lot of them, especially when you're talking about the emotional changes. So, for instance, you feel this constant anxiety about what is going to happen next. So, for instance, when my mother went through the first stage of her surgery, which was a minimal one, and her organs were put to test, I think that is when she went through a lot of anxiety, and she had this constant panic of what is going to happen next. And you feel this emotional turmoil within yourself. You want to isolate yourself, you don't wish to talk to anyone. And on top of that, additionally, your body is also giving you a lot of pains. You have body aches, and post surgery also you go through a lot of body aches. And I think that is a constant complaint that I get from my mother, that she faces a lot of body ache. And that also affects you emotionally, that you're aging. How far will you be able to go with that body ache? It hinders your everyday activities, right? So whatever you want to do, you feel that your energy is being stalled and you cannot move ahead. You feel that whether you're the same person that you used to be, and whether you're still being able to connect with others, whether you will be able to go out with your friends and enjoy, whether you will have that freedom in movement after surgery. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of um, negative thoughts start creeping in. But then I think it is also important to have that right kind of network around you, who will constantly keep you motivated, who will keep you in loop, who will try and encourage you, and have that conversation set in, that you will be fine, or that positive thought inflicted in you that you will be fine. So I think it is very important to have that positive surrounding around you, and that building of network, which will constantly keep you moving throughout the phase of your surgery and after that. Because it is not just that phase of surgery, it is also what is happening after your surgery. So how your body responds to the surgery, whether you're feeling fine after the surgery, because there are a lot of long term effects that stay with you even after you've gone through the surgery. So I think it is very, very important to have those social networks and not completely isolate yourself in that kind of situation.
Okay, so what I got from you at this point of our conversation is that when you undergo a surgery, there are other like post operation considerations for a patient that to so that she can really fully recover. So it's not just the physical recovery, but also the psychological or emotional recovery, because she's passing through from the menstrual phase to the menopausal phase. So you were saying also about her energy being um, changing and not being able to do the same activities that she was able to do when she was younger. I'm just wondering what was the surgery that she needed to undergo, and how long was it? Like she was confined in the hospital, how many days, and the recovery stage. Would you mind to share it with us? So just so that we have the picture of
Picture,
how
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it was a total hysterectomy, and I think, yes, she was there in the hospital, but what took her time to recover was more at home. So I think that put her through a lot of physical pain as well as emotional anxiety, like I was mentioning earlier. That, that constant feeling of when will I be fine? When will I be able to get back to what I was like before the surgery? And because she had drain pipes running in and out of her body, that was very painful for her. So what I'm trying to put across is that the physical pain comes along with the emotional changes that you go through. And I think that kind of a dialogue is very, very important, because if you look at the textbooks that are taught in the schools globally, be it the global north or the global south, the reproductive system in itself is shown in isolation from the body. So the girls do not know where the reproductive system is located in the body. And there is no information about period pain, about the discomfort, about menopause. So the everyday reality is distorted in the textbook. So it is very clear information, very clear conversation about menstruation is required in the textbooks, because unless you know where the reproductive system is located, why you are menstruating, how that process happens, why do you face the period pain, these are realities that you need to put together. So, the theory needs to come together with practice of everyday reality to put forward a conversation about menstruation. And I think that is what my mother's experience also puts forward, that, surgery is scientific. Total hysterectomy is scientific, but then when you're contextualizing it in the everyday experience of the everyday reality, there is more to it. There is physical pain, there are emotional changes. So I think being alert of bringing these together is very, very important.
Okay. Thank you for, so when you say, because this, I want to expand on this because our webinar is more on the surgical menopause. So when you said that your mom underwent hysterectomy, is that correct? So
Yes,
this,
yes.
yeah, this process, just so that the other menstruators who are not yet in this stage can be, we can be on the same page. So when you say hysterectomy, what is it? What are the parts of the body of a menstruator that's being taken out, or what
Yeah.
is it? Yeah, can you walk us
So
through this?
yeah, so it is basically having your ovaries, your uterus, basically the organs majorly associated with the process of reproduction being removed. And it takes quite a lot of hours to go through that operation, and it takes time to recover from that. So recovery, if you're expecting recovery over just 1 or 2 days or over a couple of weeks, that doesn't happen. You have to be very patient with your body. You have to be very careful about not being exposed to germs, which can infect your body and your surgery. So I think more the surgery is a very, it carries on for a very long duration. And what is particularly of importance is the post surgery stage, when it is not just the body that has undergone changes, but there are emotional changes that have crept through. And I think at this point, I also would like to mention that, it is also important for policymakers or, educational policies that are taking place to be conscious that the global south has a variety of ethnographic components. Now, what do I mean by ethnographic components is there are a variety of caste groups, class groups. You have people from different religious backgrounds who engage in different practices in their everyday lives. And also different class groups might not have access to resources. So for instance, in case of my mother, we possibly gave her exposure to the best of surgery possible, the best of doctors, the best team of doctors, the best sources of medical science. But then it is also important to understand that people from different class groups might not have access to the best kind of doctors, or the best kind of information that is required. The resources, the access to resources might not be available to people from different socioeconomic status. So it is important to be conscious for policymakers of these variations and these diversities that exist in the global south, and to frame policies that particularly aim at a particular class group or a caste group. And also, it is important to understand that often people will not feel comfortable to go and approach a doctor and share their experience of menstruation. And there are particular considerations about whether the doctor is a male or a female. So if there is a male doctor, the woman will constantly consider that it is a male doctor. Should I go and converse about menstruation with him, or should I find out if there is a option for a female doctor I can go to? So I think these are little considerations that are very important to be conscious of, and it is particularly of importance to policymakers and those who put forward the policies and want to implement them, that there are diversities of experiences. So it is not just one experience. My mother's experience might be different from other women who are facing menopause. So I think it is important to be very, very conscious about these differences.
Uh, I would like to bank on your points on the physical and the emotional. Now I'm wondering, when she had this surgery, was she employed or is she retired? I mean, we now go to we now go to that, since it's May 1, so I think it's Labor Day in the in across the globe. So I just thought of, let's put it another way. Like, was she employed this time, or she was retired? Does she have health benefits, so she was able to successfully um brave through the procedure?
No, my mother has been a homemaker always, and she's definitely not a working woman as you would title it, as someone who's l- earning, like we call, from the labor market. But then again, I don't think that homemakers are any less than the ones who go and get the professional incomes. I think they have a lot of more responsibilities to maneuver through in their everyday lives. So I think that is also, like, challenging the gender roles that we bring across. And I think that also helps me delve into the fact that surgical menopause is not just about you heading towards menopause at a particular age and then going through menopause. It could also be that someone who wants to convert to a different gender might want to go through menopause, surgical menopause. So I think this inclusive dialogue is very important. And since you mentioned International Labor Day, I think women who have not retired or who are still working can also go through similar kind of procedures. In that case, I think their process of recovery or them going through that uh, process of operation might be different from my mother's experience. So I think that is what I was mentioning earlier as well, that you need to be very conscious of the diversity of experiences. And plus, you also need to take into consideration whether there are paid leaves available or there are no paid leaves. So, for example, the domestic helps back in the global south might not be entitled to paid leave always. So there might be exception cases where the people that they are working for gives them paid leaves, and they can go ahead and get a surgery done, and they know that even if I go back later on, I will have my work then. But then what about those domestic helps who do not get the paid leaves, and if they are absent from work from a longer period of time, their work goes. So you are in a two-way kind of situation where on the one hand you lose your work, and on the other hand you are having to go through this kind of phase of menopause where your body is responding differently, and you have to go through surgery, and there is a post surgery stage. So I think there is a diversity of occupations that women engage in, and also to be very conscious of that surgical menopause is not just about women, it is also about women. I mean, if you involve the LGBTQ community, it is also about surgical menopause, to stop your periods, to convert to a different gender. I think that inclusive dialogue is very important.
Okay, now that so it's getting more interesting now because you've mentioned about this transitioning. In the Philippines, we are a very conservative country. But and I think we have a different it will take time for us to really understand this. But then one other angle that I would like to explore is the role of men during this time. Like for those women who have partners or has um men in their lives, like their spouse or their husbands. For this particular conversation, is your father involved, or is he aware, or your brothers, are they aware, like because a conversation about these things is not exclusive. When you talk about diversity, when you talk about inclusivity, yeah, we have those LGBTQ community, but we also have men, and we cannot take them out of this equation because they also need to be aware, just like what you said. Some menstruators would think if they're going to consult with a female physician, or would they be open to consulting or going to a gynecologist, a male gynecologist. So in your case, I mean, in the situation of your mom, how was the participation of the males?
Okay. I think this is something, again, I have never felt that it is not normal. So, I have grown up in a family where I have never seen my father hush away from talking about menstruation. I have had my father buy sanitary napkins for me. And I think I once asked him deliberately that, would you be okay if you're buying a packet of sanitary napkin from the pharmacy, and the shopkeeper just gives it to you without wrapping it up in black polythene or a newspaper or a brown paper bag? So would you take it like that, and would you come home? And she said, yeah. And he said, yes, why not? I mean, what is so, hush hush about it? So I have never faced that kind of environment where I felt the need to hush away or, shy away from talking about menstruation. So I've never felt that. So it is very unusual for me to not talk about menstruation or to shy away from talking about menstruation. And my father had a very, very active role to play throughout my mother's surgery, and I think he was the one who would be there with him in the hospital, while I would be at home managing other things at home. And I was preparing for London during that time, so we used to balance it out. So it was my father who had a very active role to play in comforting my mother, giving her that emotional comfort that she needed. So I think it is very important for men to have that dialogue about menstruation. And I think we are heading towards this change, because I have seen men converse about menstruation and not hush away about it. And I personally, when I go through period pain, I've had conversations with my male friends as well about this. So I think it is very important to have, like I said, that inclusive lens is very important. But again, when you are being inclusive, you also have to remember that there is an intersectional dialogue coming in. Like I mentioned, that not it is not uniform. The geographical setting of the global south is not uniform. So you do have diversities in class, in caste, in religion. So you need to be aware of those diversities. But then at the same time, the role of men can be very important in setting that conversation ahead in normalizing the talks and dialogues of menstruation in everyday life.
Yeah, so I think this made our conversation flavorful. So now while you were discussing that, in my mind I was hoping, yeah, maybe next time we can also invite some men there out there,
Yes,
like gynecologists or those
yes,
who,
absolutely.
so that they can also share their insights or how do they perceive it, like they have a different reproductive organ, right? And then they
Yeah,
would examine or they would cater to women. But
yeah,
this kind of conversation I think is refreshing in a sense that we can broaden the perspective and also
yes.
see different lenses.
Yes, and I think it is also important to understand that, you know, everywhere it is not necessary that you will have a female gynecologist available.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
there can be a male gynecologist. So, you have to sort of embark on that journey where conversing about menstruation should feel just as normal when you're talking to a male gynecologist as you would talk to a female gynecologist. So I think that is very, very important when I talk about the inclusive lens, inclusivity in terms of menstrual talk and dignity. So I think, yes, it would be very interesting to know it from the perspective of a male gynecologist, that you know how they uh, address menstruation or how they address diagnosis associated with menstruation.
Yes, so yeah, maybe next conversation will be with males. I don't know, but anyway, I would like to also ask our audience, for those who are watching with us right now, for those who are listening to our conversation right now, you can please feel free to share your comments, or if you will be watching this through our YouTube channel, these are the questions that I have for you. And then you can still freely post your comments. First question that I have here for our dear audience is that, have you experienced any physical or emotional challenges during your menopausal stage? So this question is for those who are at their menopausal stage or those who would want to have surgical menopause, as what Udita was mentioning a while ago. And also the other question that I had here is, how about those who are listening or watching us right now, what are your thoughts about menopause? Is it exciting for you? Is it frightening? Or please share your thoughts with us. We'd love to also read your comments, and so that we can expand on this conversation later on, and we can keep the conversation going so that we can explore the world of menopause. Okay, so now that we have those kinds of situations, and here in the Philippines, I think we have yeah, male gynecologists or specialists, and they're, as a female, it's kind of icky at times, but then when you think about it, they're very professional. So I think that they also contribute a lot in the well-being of um, menstruators. So um, so for our audience is still, maybe they're still absorbing the conversation, but for the first few minutes of our conversation, we were talking about the lived experience of Udita's mother when she went through hysterectomy. And fortunately for her, her mom has a support system, a supportive husband. But then, as Udita was saying, we have to remember that we can have different circumstances when it comes to this phase of a menstruator's life. I'd also want to add that in the in the context of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, we see it as a holistic cycle. So menstruation or menstruator's life begins at, yeah, of course, from birth, and then they puberty, and um, then later on you go adolescent, and then menopause. So it's really a cycle. So in this conversation, we would like to push the the issue that we should not stop from just being a menstruator, because after menstruation, after that, puberty and adolescence, there's menopause. And now we would also want those who are watching with us, or those who will watch this conversation, to also take a step further. No, can we just reflect on what our contributions, what our challenges are as menstruators, or as daughters or sons of a menstruators, of a menstruator.
Also,
And yeah.
yeah, and also I think it is very important to remember that if you walk yourself through the recent research or the recent scholarship that is available in the context of menstruation, I think just handing out sanitary napkins is not enough, or just handing out menstrual products is not enough. So you see a lot of policies, you see a lot of schools attempting to provide free sanitary napkins for the girls in school. So I think that kind of oversimplifies the concerns associated with menstruation, because rather it actually sort of amplifies and sort of reiterates the issue of stigma that menstruation has to be hidden, it has to be concealed, it cannot be open to the public eye. So that is why we are giving you the sanitary napkin, so that you can conceal menstruation and you can completely hide it. I think it goes way beyond that. It is important to give the right kind of information to the girls, expose them to the variety of menstrual products that are available and help them make that informed choice. So, if you have information about the various kinds of menstrual products, you can decide on which one to choose, which one will be good for the environment as well. Sustainable development goals are very important, right? So, disposing of sanitary napkins carelessly, having animals eat them, and having animals die, or choking the river streams, for example, because of careless disposal of sanitary napkins. So it is, again, I would like to interconnect this conversation with what I said earlier, that not everyone has that availability of space in the geographical setting that they live in. So, Supriya Garikipati in her research has talked about how women dispose of sanitary napkins in the river stream. Now, there could be several ways of thinking about it, that maybe there could be a crunch of space at their house, or they just don't want to keep that sanitary napkin in their house and they dispose it of outside. So, there could be various reasons, but then it is very important to expose the individual to information about the use, the disposal, the duration of use of sanitary napkins, if you are really promoting sanitary napkins. Because in the first place, you have a sanitary napkin company called Whisper. So, that itself is reiterating that, hush, you do not talk about menstruation, you have to whisper about it. So, I think these things are very important. You cannot just hand over a sanitary napkin and say, okay, we are done with it. It goes way beyond just, providing sanitary napkins to the girls.
Yes, I like that. Actually, I with that point, I'd like to also extend it to what do we do for demonstrators during calamities, especially right now
Yeah.
that we're having global warming, we're having climate change. So right now in the Philippines, we experience, I think, 43 or 47 degrees heat index. I'm not sure with other countries, but in the Philippines, and for me here as Filipino, it's like it's so hot. So and then a few days ago, I had my monthly period, and it's really something. It's it's very uneasy. It's very, and I don't know. Maybe we also have to consider how do we do it? Like, now that there's going to be drought, or there's heat index, later on we'll be having flood and all these things. What do we do? Usually here, we would have like packs for those who are going to evacuate, right? But um the usual packs would consist of canned goods, and then some toiletries. But and then usually it won't include those sanitary pads. And then when you were saying that, like, yeah, we don't we we have to use sanitary pads, but we have to also educate them on what to
Yeah.
use and how to dispose it and all that stuff. But then, really, the question that I have in mind right now is like, how do we make sure that it is accessible during calamities, and how do we make sure that aside from the sanitation, the safety of the
Yeah.
menstruators during calamities. And I think these are the things that we have to really consider in
Yes.
in the local levels, especially in the
Yes.
local and even in a global context. We have to consider these things, not just the sanitation or the hygiene, because
Yes.
it is just it doesn't even scratch the surface. It barely
Yeah.
addresses the need of the menstruators, right?
Yes, I think it oversimplifies. Like, if you read Chris Bobble's work, I think she also mentions this, that, it oversimplifies a very complex issue. So, yes, definitely, menstrual products are a part of this dialogue, but then it is not just the part of this dialogue. So, reducing menstrual experiences to just menstrual products is like, you're just commodifying the entire issue of menstruation. So I think there are and the term hygiene in itself reiterates the fact that menstruation is associated with pollution. So rather, you could, like, even in a previous meeting, we had this conversation about how you can replace the term hygiene with management, how you manage menstruation. So I think these are changes that we often overlook when we are involving heavy terms like policies, for example. So the heavy terms need to be dropped, and you need to really contextualize menstrual experiences, like you mentioned, at the local level, at the community level, at the individual level. So it all needs to be connected. So you cannot forget about the everyday lived experiences of the menstruating bodies, and just focus on the textbook education, or the knowledge that is imparted in schools, or just hand over sanitary napkins. So it all has to be connected, and integrated approach is what I strongly advocate for.
Yes, so with that, I would like to, since we are talking about the surgical menopause in the social cultural setting,
Yeah.
when it comes to social cultural setting, I think in the global south, we are more conservative, right? And when we had our prior conversation, we were saying that it's not hygiene, it's management. But I think the key point that I would like to linger, I would like our audience to ponder upon, or I would want them to really think of, is that how do we really put dignity? How do we really put
Yeah.
dignity to our everyday experience as a menstruator?
Yes,
And
I think
also,
that is, yeah, and I think that is when you talk about dignified menopause, I think that is where lot of what I spoke about comes together. So, for instance, you have to have the information, you have to have the ability to listen to your body, and not prioritize what others around you have to tell you. So, for instance, if you are going through irregular period and if you don't know what is going wrong with your body, it's always wise to go and talk to others or talk to experts in the medical field, and have this conversation put forward rather than concealing it. So I think to have that dignity, I think you have to have various sectors involved. You have to have the men also converse about menstruation. You have to be very conscious about the diversity of experiences. You have to be conscious about inclusivity. And by inclusivity, I mean the term menstruator in itself. It is not just women. So I think these are the various sectors around menstruation which needs to come together when you're talking about dignity. And I think it is also important to have that agency to decide that, if I am going through irregular period, I will go and visit a doctor and I will not shy away from it. It is important for me to address the concern rather than conceal the concern. So I think these are the, interconnections that you need to draw upon.
Yes. So now that we have this, I think we have unboxed a lot of possible issues. And going back to um, enjoying this holiday, this May 1st, um, one of the one of the causes or the underlying causes of gender pay gap, I would say, is that um, for demonstrators is women would always have lesser pay. I'm not sure if this would be true to other global south countries, but then sometimes let's just say that you are a professional and you receive this rate as your professional fee, or you have this salary, but then of course within a month you'll have monthly period. And
Mm.
usually, when you have monthly period, there will be a time when you'll get dysmenorrhea, you'll have migraine, and you'll have all this body aches and whatnot. So you will be forced to be absent from your work. And then when you're not able to work, that's the time. Those are the instances when your monthly income will be affected. I'm not sure with other countries. I'm not sure, but then based on experience, one way or another, your income will be affected once you do not show up for work. So, in several articles that I have read, it has, like in the International Labor Organization, it is one of the the reasons why there's disparity when it comes to pay. So, but with that, we I would like to push now the conversation on as you as a researcher and you as someone who is trying to really invite more people to think through these kinds of situations, and to also hoping that some policymakers or decision makers and other stakeholders could also resonate with us with our conversation on how they could also contribute on on alleviating these challenges. So my next question for you, Dita, would be, as a menstruator and as a researcher, what are the challenges? Of course, we had so many identified challenges, right? But for the sake of urgency and call to action for us individuals in this conversation, and for those who are in the position to create um, changes, what challenges would you want um, others to address? Like at least three, if you have.
I think I identified three key challenges that I think are interconnected, and I will draw on my previous interaction as well. So I think the first one would be to have dialogue about not just menstruation and not just menarche included in the curriculum in schools, but then also to have menopause included. And I think that is for two reasons primarily. One is because it is a life, like, I won't say it's a lifelong process, but then it comes in different life stages, right? So to prepare that individual to embrace menstruation as it comes to them at different life stages. That is one reason. And another reason is, like I mentioned, and this also interconnects with my second point, that, there are girls or there are menstruators from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So, what if the it is a first generational learner, for example? So, equipping that first generational learner with the information about menstruation, encompassing menopause, can help that first generation learner to address menstruation in and within the family as well. So, for instance, if that learner's mother is going through a situation like my mother went through, then I think uh, the, she would be much more better equipped to address the concern in the context of her mother, and probably advance the conversation and get the treatment, and have this cure at a very early stage. So I think that also takes me to my second point, that you have to be conscious of the diversity of experiences in the global south, and to be aware that educational policies or the kind of knowledge that is imparted in schools are meet those needs of girls coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds into that school. So I think it is very important to be conscious of that. And the third point that I also mentioned earlier is to be inclusive, to have an inclusive dialogue about menstruation and menopause. And by inclusivity, like I earlier mentioned, about surgical menopause is not just about women heading towards surgical menopause. It can also be women who want to convert to a different gender and therefore they want to go through surgical menopause, or it can be the experiences of women in different situations, like what about the sex workers, what about the women in the detention centers, what about women in the prison. So I think you have to learn to contextualize menstruation in different contexts. And by context, I just don't mean the local or the global. I mean context within the local, within the global. For instance, like I mentioned, in the school, in the university, in the workplace, in the detention centers. What about sex workers? What about their experience? So, these are things we don't normally talk about. Like, we are not talking about the menstrual experiences of sex workers. We are not talking about menstrual experience of the women who live in prison or in detention centers. So I think to have that marginalized communities into the mainstream conversation and include them as well is very, very important. And I think these are the three key themes that I would like to put forward through this conversation.
Okay, that's very interesting. I hope that few years from now we can still have this kind of conversation, and
Yeah.
maybe that time we can now compare notes, like what have what is new in this country, in the global south, or what is new, were there exchanges from other advanced countries, like the best practices from maybe in Europe or in other in other continents. I just hope that our conversation would also open other conversations, like more specific more specific groups. And when you were talking about the sex workers and other marginalized groups, I was also thinking about, how about those who are in the religious sectors? I mean, those who observe certain rituals and all that. I'm wondering what's their experience about
I
surgical
think
menopause.
that also strikes a point of interest to me, that which maybe I can explore ahead, that is menstruation as stigma is similar to menstruation as pollution. So I think when you're talking about menstruation as pollution, you are more concerned with the ritual pollution, right? So it's like, you, when, like, particularly in the global south, when you have your period, you will not go to a religious place or you will not pray. So, these are the kind of restrictions that are imposed when you're talking about menstruation as pollution. So to me, it looks like, people are aware that the girl is menstruating, and therefore you restrict the girl from participating in ritual activities. So menstruation as pollution is more like menstruation is visible, but you're trying to restrict the girl. But on the contrary, when you look at menstruation as stigma, it has more to do with completely concealing the fact that you're menstruating. So it's like, you let no one find out about the fact that you're menstruating at all, and you're using sanitary napkins, you're conscious about not staining your clothes wherever you go. So I think this distinction about menstruation as stigma and menstruation as pollution could also be an interesting conversation ahead when you are comparing the global north and the global south, or particularly experiences in the global south.
Yeah, so at this point, Udita, I think we have explored a lot about the context of
Yes.
critical menopause, and also we were able to address the socio-cultural setting, the different kinds of settings. Though we haven't delved into specific countries or specific groups yet, but maybe
Yeah.
in your paper later on, you can share it with us. And to our audience, Udita has her YouTube channel, so maybe later on you can
Yeah.
watch it there. Can you share what's your YouTube channel so that they can also
Okay,
listen
so
or watch.
basically, right now in my YouTube channel, I've not yet started conversing about menstruation. So it is more about a channel which is, embarking on a journey to help those who want to pursue a PhD abroad, uh, in a full funding. Like, I have a full funding to pursue a PhD. So, it is more oriented towards sharing tips and sharing information with those who want to pursue a PhD. But then I want to take the YouTube channel ahead with conversations on menstruation. So I think it will be a very good platform to, reach out to a wider variety of audience. And now that we are, living in an era where everyone has a smartphone or everyone has access to social media, I think it is very important to use these platforms in a way to advance conversations about topics that we do not usually talk about in the mainstream conversations.
Okay, so thank you, Odita. And I would just like to also remind everyone that the underlying theme of our conversation is dignified menopause is dignified menopause is not a privilege, it's a human right. So we would like to put forward that we as a menstruator, we want everyone to have dignity. And we also want those who are capable of making a change to do their part so that we all can can experience inclusivity and respect, and also the access that you were you were talking about a while ago. So, any other additional inputs or insights that you would want to add so far before we close our conversation?
No, I don't think I would add anything new to what I've already said. But then I think I would encourage all the listeners and the viewers to keep advancing conversations on menstruation at every stage of life, and irrespective of which gender you belong to. I think to normalize conversations about menstruation, I think it is important for people belonging to different genders to come in and advance this conversation. And it shouldn't be that it is just women discussing about menstruation, or it is not just women willing to supervise PhD projects on menstruation. It is not just women on global platforms talking about menstruation. So I think I encourage that kind of conversations to be taken ahead, because I think if you really have to advance this discipline and this kind of research uh, forward, and you have to take this forward, then I think you have to have every stakeholder come in, and stakeholders from different gender come in. So I think that is something that I would reiterate and encourage everyone to do.
But before I let you go, I would want to know, how did you learn about Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation?
Okay. All right. So I think I learned about it through Twitter. The handle of the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. Also, I was reading a book, a recently published book, and I think I can show that book as well. I have it with me right now. It is called The Experiences of Menstruation. Is it visible? I don't know if it's visible though. But
Yeah.
it is the experiences of menstruation from the global south and the global north towards a visualized, inclusive, and applied menstruation studies. And this is also a book that I reviewed recently. And I think that this is the book also that helped me come across these dialogues and about the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. And I've been following the work of the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, and I think it's been a very enriching and learning experience for me as well as a researcher, because it is never a one-way process; it is always two-way. So you give and you get in return. So I think it has been a very worthwhile experience connecting and following the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation to constantly, rack your brain about those ideas that keep coming in and how you can take your research ahead on these grounds. So, and I'm very thankful to the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation for not just having me, but also responsibly taking this conversation ahead about menstruation at every life stage, including menopause.
Yeah, thank you also for your courage to really step up and then discuss about menopause. And now, actually, we were able to talk, had a conversation with Sri Lanka, with Taiwan, and from other menstruators. So, we're still opening more conversations. We're still opening more more insights. So now, as we close, thank you, Udita, for mentioning Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation and for reaching out to us. And also, we believe that this kinds of conversation will not happen without the support of other Global South Coalition chapters. We have in the Philippines, we have in Sri Lanka, we have in Nepal, we have in Cambodia, and in different parts of the world. So we just want to extend the invitation to join the conversation. So as we close, I am Amber Luminario, your moderator for this year's first ever webinar on contextualizing surgical menopause in the sociocultural setting of the Global South. And as we said, may our experiences linger so that we can make positive actions to address the issues of today and to create a better society for future generations, just like what Udita is doing. So again, thank you very much. We will look forward to your comments and for your insights as well.
And for
So
feedback, I'm looking forward to feedback as well to what I've said, and that will help me just grow on my research as well. So I'm really looking forward to feedback from all the viewers and all those who've listened to this conversation as well.
yes, and also we would like to challenge all those who are in the
Yeah.
local, in the communities, in the national levels, in the government, in the private sector, and you also mentioned about United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and yes,
Yes.
it's SDG 5 for gender equality. So we're also challenging all those ambassadors for UN SDGs. So you can take part and you can contribute. You can contribute your time, your talent, your papers, or whatever resources you have, so that we can advance this conversation and take positive action. Just like what Radha and other menstruators and other advocates has been doing for a while now. So
Yes. Thank
thank you
you
very
for this
much.
conversation.
Thank you also. See you again
Yeah.
soon.
Bye.